Where'd all y'all come from? You in here earlier. Can everybody hear me? I've never used one of these mics before. Is it coming through okay? Okay. As my mom will tell you, and as anyone who knows me will tell you, I really don't like talking about myself. And in fact, what I'm going to share with you tonight, if I can find it, I've only shared with the church here at Cross Point. And I can't tell you why I'm here tonight. I don't know why it has been arranged for me to have come on two previous occasions with two different groups here to speak. I don't find my life interesting from an observational standpoint. It's just my life. And I also don't consider anything that I have gone through or experienced to be any more challenging or any more difficult than the things that each one of you go through and have gone through in your daily lives. There's people here tonight that have got significant challenges with relationships, with a child, or with a spouse. There are people here tonight that have got significant challenges financially. There's people here tonight that have got severe health problems, much worse than anything I've been through. And I've been through all three of those categories. And your pain and your challenges are real. And I don't consider them any less difficult than anything that I've gone through. And so from that standpoint, I still remain baffled as to why people find what I'm going to share with you this evening of any interest or edification. And with that said, those of you that have your Bibles, turn to Job, the first chapter. I want to share with you a few verses here about a very interesting man. Now, the first thing I want you to note is that it is my understanding that the book of Job was the first book that was written in the Old Testament. And it's the oldest book in the Old Testament. And you're all familiar with the story. He had in verse 3, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 5,000 yokes of oxen, and 500 donkeys. Now, folks, I don't know about y'all, but where I come from, if you got a 100-head farm of anything, that's big. 7,000 sheep? Can you imagine? He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to take turns holding feast in their homes, verse 4. And they would invite their three sisters to eat and drink with them. And when a period of feasting had run its course, Job would send and have them purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned. Let's see if this will work. What do I need to do? Hit the power button? I've never done a PowerPoint presentation before on this either, so this will be interesting. What do I need to do? Click it. There we go. How hard, I wonder? Aim it that way. This is going to be interesting. What do you think? Can you operate it manually? Come again? All right, go back to the beginning. How about that? There we go. Let's see if my little pointer. Yeah, my pointer works. Tell you what, I'm in tall cotton now. Job was a great man. And when his children would get together and have feasts at weddings, etc., it says that Job would offer a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. And this was Job's regular custom. I want you to note that about Job, that when it came to his children, he was very concerned about them. And so much so that any time that they got together for a family get-together, whether it was a wedding, whether it was to celebrate a birthday, any type of feast, it was his regular custom to remember those children and to pray for them and to offer a burnt offering on their behalf in the event they might have done something wrong. Job was a family man. Job was involved with his family, even though he was a very successful businessman as well. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with those angels. And the Lord said unto Satan, where have you come from? And Satan answered the Lord, from roaming through the earth, going back and forth in it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And Satan said, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that he has flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But God, if you'll stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to his face. And the Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. You now know what's fixing to happen. One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and carried them off and put the servants to the sword. I have often imagined myself that Job was there on a beautiful day where he could see off into the horizon, and that he probably had a very nice dwelling and an area where the home place was that was up on a hill, so it drained well, and he could see off on the horizon, and he could see that messenger coming to him. And he arrives. And what he tells him is serious news, because it's having a big-time impact on him financially. And while he's there, then the next messenger comes. And he tells him he's lost another part of his flock. His oxen are gone. And he's got one messenger here telling him he's lost a third of his business. He's got another messenger that shows up when this one finished speaking and says you've lost another third of your business. And then he has another one show up and really gives him the news. And he tells him that his sons and his daughters were together feasting, and a tornado came, just like it did through Hamilton, and just like it did through Hatton, and just like it did through Alabama. And it crushed the house down on top of him, and he lost his 7 sons and his 3 daughters. And Job lamented, naked came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I leave. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. But blessed shall be the name of the Lord. I don't know about y'all. I ain't that good. I've been, to some extent, in his shoes. And the numbness that comes over you, it's hard to describe. Next slide, please. This is an early depiction of the messengers by one artist when they came to Job to tell him in his lamentation. In chapter 2, on another day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them to present themselves before him. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And Satan said, "From roaming the earth, going back and forth in it." And guess what? He still roams back and forth in it today. And he's looking for you, and he's looking for me. And the church said, louder, he's out there. Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered Job?" And he said, "Yes." But he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. "Skin for skin," Satan replied. "A man will give all he has for his own life. But stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he'll surely curse you to your face." The Lord said, "Very well, he's in your hands, but you must spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. And Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself as he sat among the ashes. And his wife said to him, "Are you kidding me? Are you still holding on to your integrity? What's God done for you? Why don't you just curse him and die?" And Job replied to the woman, "You were talking like a foolish one. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" In all this, Job did not sin in what he had said. Now each messenger that came up to Job and gave him the bad news about each thing, when he finished, as they were standing around him, each one of them said, "I am the only one who is left to come and tell you about the tragedy." And I want you to understand tonight, I don't know why I'm here, but I do know this: I am only a messenger. And what I'll share with you tonight is between us. And what I'll share with you tonight is me as a messenger. And the only reason I'm here tonight is so that the name of God can be praised. And anything I share with you is not to reflect negatively on anyone else, is not to reflect positively on me, but is for you to understand that God works in our lives and God will restore broken vessels. Next slide, please. Job fell to his knees with the absolute weight of the world on his shoulders. We've all been there in one shape, form, or another, and we're going to be there again. Just like Job. But God will restore. Let me tell you, way back yonder, in the land of cotton, where old times there are not forgotten. Next slide. I came from very humble beginnings. There were many challenges in my life as a child of a single mom. Those challenges resulted in a child that could be best characterized as someone with empathy for others, with a strong work ethic. Those hard times resulted in commitment to discipline. It resulted in the will to overcome. It also generated a tremendous amount of self-reliance. And my mother, whom I think the world of, gave me a great example of enduring and overcoming. I was in an environment where not only did I have great challenges in personal life, but unfortunately also was involved with a spiritual family at church. It's unlike this one, in my opinion. It was a group that was quick to judge. Just like Job's 3 friends were. You remember what Job's 3 friends said? Well, Job, the reason all these bad things have happened to you is because you've sinned. Job, the reason all these things are occurring is because you've done something to bring this all on yourself. You see the raised eyebrows, and you see the condescending looks, and you see the whispering in the background. They hadn't walked in our shoes. They didn't know what type of challenges we were dealing with. But they were quick to pass judgment with regards to it. But out of those challenges, with the strong work ethic, with the commitment to discipline and the will to overcome, good things came through a commitment to education. Next slide. In my high school years, I had success academically. I graduated in the top of my class. I was a state champion in basketball, and my class members were kind enough to vote for me for Mr. High School. Next slide. Oh, by the way, I got ready to go to college. I never forget being called into the counselor's office. He had gotten my testing grades back. I don't know about y'all. I don't test very well on standard testing. Apparently, I'm a dummy and don't know it. And he called me in and sat me down in his office, and he said, look, your grades are so bad, you really ought to think about going to a tech school and getting a trade or whatever, because you're never going to do any good in college. I get to college, and I'm put in an English lab. Can you believe that? Neither could the teacher. After the first week, he calls me up to class. He says, what are you doing in here? I says, apparently I don't know English. He says, get out of my class and do not come back. I don't know if I was me talking to the girl that was sitting in front of me or because of the work I did in his class. I hadn't figured it out yet. But do not let people define you by third-party standards of others. If you have a dream, pursue it. If there's something you want to go after it. Because you have God on your side. Just like Job had God by his side. Well, I get in college. Anybody bored yet? I get in college. And I had success there. I played college ball. I worked multiple jobs. I taught Sunday school. And I received academic honors. I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Alabama. I received a Rhodes Scholar nomination while I was there. I received the Distinguished Undergraduate Student Award. I was disciplined, I was focused, and I was determined. Failure was not an option. As part of my Rhodes Scholar nomination, Professor Edens was kind enough to do that. I had to write a paper and to submit it to the Rhodes Scholarship Nominating Committee. And what I wrote on was about the challenges that I'd had as a child and that my mother had had as a child, or I had had when we were together when I was small. And what I talked about in there is that I hoped that one day I could go to law school, and as part of that, be able to somehow, some way, change the laws as related to the state of Alabama to make it easier with regards to disadvantaged single moms. And that was the theme of my paper that I submitted to the committee. Next slide, please. I went to law school, at the University of Alabama, received my Juris Doctorate degree. My focus was in corporate and international studies. I also obtained a degree from the University of Brussels in EEC law, which is the European Economic Union that you hear about today. You know, all this debt of Greece and everything, and Germany's having to step in. Well, that's all part of the economic European Union that I studied about at that time. This is a picture of me while I was in law school, and let's see if we can get this my pointer to work here. There we go. This is a picture that was taken after I'd gotten off of work at midnight. I worked 3 jobs in law school. I worked as a security guard. I worked as a research assistant for one of the professors in law school, and I worked as a magistrate from 8 in the evening, or from 4 in the evening to 12 at night. Then I was on call from midnight until 8 the next morning. And what I would usually do is come in at midnight, and then I would study for a couple of hours. This is my grandfather's desk chair that he gave me when I went to law school, but it didn't have any cushions, so I got the pillows off of the couch to sit there. Didn't have a lot of money for heat, so I broke out the socks there. I was very fortunate in that I had taken typing 1 and 2 in high school. It was me and 69 women in that class. Now, y'all think that, you know, I was wasting my time in there. Well, but the teacher did too. But it comes to find out, unbeknownst to me, about 10 years later, they were going to invent something called the personal computer. And guess what? Everybody had to use a QWERTY keyboard. And so as a result of that, I was probably the only person in law school that had typed summaries that I could sit and study when I got back in. And so this was me studying, and it was required a tremendous amount of discipline. I was so focused at that time, I can't believe I'm going to admit this, but when Auburn played Alabama, while I was in law school, Bear Bryant broke the record for the most victories of all time or whatever. I stayed home and studied because I had a test on Monday and gave my tickets away to somebody else. Next slide. After law school, my career focused on corporate law, international, and technology. I was very blessed in that when I came out of law school, I got to go to work for the oldest law firm in Georgia, Adams, Gardner, Ellis, and Inglesby, formed in 1861. If you've ever heard of Citizens and Southern Bank, CNS, well, this is the firm that merged them, that became Wachovia, that is now Bank of America. Worked with them. I was their top producer, and they offered me partnership to the youngest associate in the history of the firm. Through mutual friend, I turned that down, and I was contacted by a company named M&S Computing that was in Huntsville. And they were in the high-tech industry, and I thought that's probably the direction it was going to go. And so as a result of that, I made the decision to go to work for them as their in-house general counsel, and I became the youngest general counsel to a Fortune 500 company in America. When the president decided not to port his software to the PC platform that was taking over the world, then I decided it was time for me to move on. I did, and I formed my own firm called Crowson Partners. It was the first high-tech law firm in Huntsville. I worked with almost everyone that was in Research Park. I'd worked with a lot of government contractors. I did a lot of strange deals. I worked in 39 different countries. I helped export the first fault-tolerant processors from Intel Corporation into Kazakhstan to set up their Federal Reserve System, and also provide the technology background and Balpour, where the Cosmodrome is, where they lift up the current rockets that go up to the space station, to replace the space shuttle, to provide supplies. This summer, decided to come over and go and stay at the Marriott Hotel and Spa. That's a fine hotel. Never been there before. Went out by the pool, and I'm catching rays. And I get hungry and go over there to a little restaurant area where I could get some quesadillas and some beverages. And I'm sitting there, and up walks this guy. And he's a few years older than me, and boy, you talking about, he is Mr. Confident, buddy. He's just brimming from ear to ear. And he's full of himself, and he starts waxing eloquent about the Mannings. And he knew Archie Manning because he had graduated from Mississippi State in the 70s in chemical engineering. And I made the comment, yeah, I knew him. I thought he was a great guy. And so we struck up a conversation on football, and then I asked him, what do you do? And then he starts to wax eloquent for about 10 minutes about what all he has done in the technology industry, and he was a technology attorney, and all of these technology deals he did, and finance he was in, and everything else, and he goes on and on and on and on and on. And then he stops and says, well, I guess you didn't understand a word I said. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I understood every word, and it stunned him. He said, how's that? I said, well, I did the acquisition of Fairchild Semiconductor by Intergraph Corporation that resulted in the technology transfer of all their patents. That was the basis of them collecting $1.2 billion in royalty revenue from Intel Corporation and AMD. He said, that was you? I said, yes. He turned to Tony, and he said, I'm going to change his wording a little bit. He said, that was a big freaking deal. And he said, he pointed to me, and he said to Tony, who was with me, and he said, and he's a big freaking deal. Now, folks, all of that and $1.18 to get you a cup of coffee at Waffle House in the morning. Next slide. I was very active civically. When I moved to Madison to go to work for Intergraph, there were about 3,300 people in the city. There's a little over 48,000 now. I got all this crap in a box somewhere. It's all stored away. It shows you the importance of it. I was the founding president of the chamber and the basketball and the recreation. I was the gentleman who was behind the scenes helping get the school system taken private and get the new schools built like Bob Jones here. I was the guy that worked on the first CON, whereby Madison could end up obtaining its own hospital. There's recreation, education, business-wise. I was involved in it and was very busy from a civic standpoint. And the reason I did it was very simple. It's because my children and my family were going to be able to use each of these facilities. Next slide, please. I was also very involved in my family. I had a good marriage with 3 sons. I was active in their lives academically, athletically, and spiritually. Some of my favorite memories as a father was loading them up in the SUV, going to church on Sunday morning, and playing Who Am I? And the first question was, how many children did Adam and Eve have? And the correct answer is, everybody wants to say 2, but there were 3. And there were some daughters that came along. But we would do that. And tremendous, tremendous memories. Every one of their teams, I coached. I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go into work so I could get in 12 hours and be done in time for purposes of coming home and spending time with them. Because I wanted to give to my sons what I didn't have when I was growing up. There is no greater calling than being a parent. God's given you a blessing in that. Take it seriously, cherish it, and hug those kids every morning before they leave your sight. Next slide, please. In 2001, the winds of change began to blow in my life. In 1 Peter 5, I think if there was going to be a New Testament passage that would be written to follow on to Job, I would think that this would be it. And here the Apostle Peter, and addressing a lot of different areas, talked about how we should be in tough times. And he said in verse 7, "Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may lift you up in due season. Cast all your anxiety upon him, because he cares for you." Folks, especially you guys out there and you men out there, we got that testosterone flowing through our bodies. It's the way God made us. And we've got that ego. And when tough times come, a lot of times what we do is we think we can work harder and we can work longer and we can bootstrap it and we can overcome it, instead of taking it and turning it over to God. You've got to humble yourself. And you've got to turn it over to him when tough times come. That doesn't mean you don't do your part. But you got to realize that control is an illusion for fools. In 2001, as you can tell, my practice and a lot of my investments were involved in technology. And those of you remember will remember the technology crash that came. And financial uncertainty came into my life. In 2002, my house burned. I don't know if you've ever been displaced and had to live in an apartment for a year. Some of you may have from the recent tornadic weather that came through. But there's nothing quite like being touched in your own home, in your own residence. And then in 2003, the winds began to blow harder. Only very few people have seen this next slide. I don't show it to very many people. It was a sunny day, like today. It was beautiful. My brother and I were out clearing property. He was operating a bulldozer, pushing the trees down, and I was cutting them up in 20-foot sections. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, what's an attorney doing out there running a chainsaw? That's a valid question. Can't argue with you at all. He had two piles going, and he would push in one pile, and I'd cut it up, and then he'd push one in another pile, and I'd cut it up. Being the hard-working, industrious beaver that I am, I finished on this pile here, and I moved over here. Unbeknownst to me, he was backing the bulldozer up at the same time and raised the blade. The next tree he pushed down was on top of me. Next slide, please. I had a crushed skull, broke most everything from the waist up. My shoulders, cracked almost all my ribs, several vertebrae in my back. I had 7 major surgeries in 3 years. They would repair one piece of me at a time. Rebuilt my sockets, my nose, my jaw, my shoulders. They had to wait a while, repair one piece, wait a while, build another piece. They rebuilt my skull with titanium. I've got a hole in the top of my head about this big around. Suffered severe trauma brain injury. And I don't know if any of you know what that is, but I think it's becoming more well known with the news anchor that got blown up over in Iraq and the troops that are coming back dealing with that. It takes 24 to 36 months for the brain to re-network around the damaged tissue. I suffered seizures. I couldn't read books for almost 2 years. It was on $1,000 worth of prescription medication a month. I wore shoes with Velcro and flip-flops because I could not bend over and tie my shoes. It was a body cast. First started walking, I had a walker. And you want to talk about being on your knees like Job was. I was there. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't do anything about it. The winds began to blow harder. Next slide, please. Job said, into this world came I naked, and from this life naked shall I depart. Within 2 or 3, well, it was really about 2 months after I got hurt, my wife, my ex-wife, on good days, I will say that her life coping abilities were exceeded. What transpired is that she tried to have my doctors have me committed. When that didn't work, she called my family and tried to get them to come get me in my clothes, claiming that I was out of control and all kinds of things. And of course, I didn't know when this was going on. I didn't find out this until I discovered the paperwork later. She then left when those first 2 things didn't work out, and she took my children out of state. I never knew what the words PAS stood for. But if you've ever been without your children for a year, it's called parental alienation syndrome. And what happens is that if the child is being kept secluded with one parent, then there's a disassociation that occurs with the other one. She took up with her former fiance from college. I never had any conversations with him. I've always been I'm a nonviolent type guy unless you back me in a corner. And then I try to negotiate my way out of it. But I had one conversation with him. He was constantly texting and contacting my sons when I finally did get to be with them after a year. And trying to get them to go with him to do whatever, etc. And I called him up and I said, look, you got 5 kids in Texas you left to come over here. If you want to be involved in some children's lives, when you get involved in your own children's lives in Texas, and leave my sons alone when they're with me. And he said, it's a level playing field now. And that's the only time I was tempted. But I didn't. Next slide. I now had nothing. I had no family. I had no health. And I had no finances. And I asked myself why. And the reason being is that on that sunny day, when that pine tree fell down on me, and they were transporting me in the ambulance, I had the opportunity to see the other side. And I had the opportunity to cross over and go home. And I came back for one reason, and that was my family. And now I'm lying in bed in a body cast alone, and I can't even see him. And I remember asking God, why? Why did you let me come back? This makes no sense. And I can remember thinking Job had it better than me, because Job got closure. He lost his sons. They died. He was able to bury them. He was able to mourn. He was able to grieve. He was able to have closure. And I knew mine was in the next state, and I couldn't see him. And I couldn't touch him. And I couldn't hold him. And I couldn't say goodbye. Peter says, after, verse 10, 1 Peter 5, after you suffered for a little while, God himself will restore you. Next slide, please. After you have suffered a little while, God himself will restore you. And the church said, every time. And in his time. Not mine, not yours, but in his time. And he did restore me. I drove here tonight. I'm able to walk. They didn't know if I'd walk or live or walk again. I'm able to share with you. And I didn't know that ever happened. He restored me financially. My businesses were basically dependent upon me. So when I went down, they went down. Valuation went down. The divorce occurred. As I got better, my businesses started improving. And then one of them did very, very well. And it was sold at a very, very nice return. I was then taken back to court by my ex for purposes of retrieving that money. And the judge said, you're the one that drafted the documents. And he couldn't even read them when you presented them to him. What you wrote, you shall live with. More importantly to me than anything else was the fact that he restored my children and brought them a blessing to me. Next slide, please. My youngest son, Cole, is a very special young man, just as yours are special to you. He was the one of my 3 children who came to every one of the hospitals I was in. And boy, I've been in them all, including Helen Keller over here. Been in them all. And he would make his mother bring him and come see me. Because I came back and was reunited and involved in his life, was able to help and guide this young man. He became All-State in chorus. He got to play on an undefeated football season. He was voted by the faculty of his school as a student of distinction. And right now, he's in pre-med second year at Wake Forest University, and he's active in Campus Crusade. He's one of the finest young men I've ever been around, even though he's mine. Next slide. If God had not brought me back, I would have not had the blessing of being involved in my middle son's life. He was All-State in chorus. He was All-State in football. He was a student of distinction. And he is currently at the University of Alabama obtaining his MBA, and he's very active in campus outreach ministry. I cannot begin to tell you what a fine young man he is and what a blessing he's been to me. And that all has to do with God and nothing with me. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Well, maybe we won't have a next slide. 2 other blessings I'm going to share with you, and then it's with you. And I apologize. If anybody needs to leave, y'all get up and leave. It won't offend me at all. I think we've got 39 seconds. Let me see if I can get it done. One of the blessings that I have is that from time to time, and I don't actively do anything, just like how I got here tonight. Wasn't my choosing. People will come to me and say, I have a family member that's been severely hurt and has severe trauma brain injury. Will you come and talk with me? Y'all have a member here. I don't know if she's here or not. Her name is Kathy. And I gave her my telephone number after one of the classes we did here. And she called me and told me about Brady and Marjorie. And Marjorie has a son who's 23 that was injured in a four-wheeler accident. He's busted up and he's got severe TBI. And they asked me if I would come. And I had the privilege of going yesterday and sitting with that young man. He's only a year out after his injuries, and so he's still in that halfway point. He's not there yet. But I'm going to tell you something. What a blessing it was to sit there and talk to Marjorie and to help her understand what's going on inside her son's mind and why his behavior is the way it is. I'm going to tell you something else I told her. I told her I have seen a lot of different churches and congregations. I asked them, I said, are y'all attending church anywhere right now? Have you got a home church? And they says, well, we've been talking about that. I says, let me give you one word. I said, Cross Point. I said, I don't know these folks that well. I've been a handful of times. It's been in situations like this or visiting with my mom. But I said, I believe that's a congregation that's about Jesus Christ. I believe it's a church that's about love. I believe it's a church that is about looking out for the fellow brother and sister. And I says, if you're looking for someplace, Cross Point is where you ought to consider coming. And I think they're going to visit. And if they do, I hope that you prove me right. And you'll reach out to them and show them the love of Christ when they come. Next slide. Mom doesn't know this. And I'm going to condense a long story, make it very short. 3 years ago, I had an attorney friend come to me, had a single mom with children. She was in an exploited situation where she'd been taken advantage of by her ex. Not unlike what our situation was when we were young. And I agreed behind the scenes to help the attorney provide him the resources that he needed in order to get the law changed in Alabama. And on May the 11th, 2011 of this year, the law in Alabama has been changed. One at the Supreme Court level. So that where moms with single children are involved and they've been taken advantage of, the long arm of the law can reach out and provide equity where it couldn't ever have before. If God hadn't brought me back, God could not have provided through me this blessing. And folks, listen to me. It's got nothing to do with me. Zero. It's got everything to do with our Lord and our Savior and our God and His Spirit leading us. And that's what I want you to leave with tonight. Next slide. I'm done. I normally provide a Q&A period, but I think we probably have overrun that. Does anybody have any questions? I'll take a couple right quick before we have a final song. Yes, ma'am. Come again? Very good question. My oldest one, unfortunately, became very manipulated by his mother. And as a consequence of that, he very much withdrew and did not allow me to reestablish a relationship with him. And I hope and pray and believe that in time that he will see the light. But once again, that's something outside of my control and something I've had to turn over to God. Good question. Who else? Yes, sir.
You have lingering problems from the injury?
Yes, sir. I can't finish on time. Yes. I do. When low pressure systems come through, I'm very fog-headed. If you're ever talking with me and I pause and look off in the distance, that's telling you the spark plugs aren't firing. I have a great deal of arthritis, and low pressure systems really impact that, and I still have seizures occasionally. Anyone else? One final question. Come again? I did. As I was telling the lady this morning who was cutting my hair, she says, "You're married?" And I says, "I was this morning. I'll let you know when I get home tonight." Fantastic lady. Got married a year ago. She's a nurse. I figure she can wheel around my wheelchair when I can't walk anymore. Thank y'all so much. I want you to know, and not in this setting, but each time that I have the privilege to sit with y'all, whether it's being led in song service by Al or with y'all in a class or visiting with my mom or whatever the case may be, I consider it a blessing and a privilege to be with y'all. You don't understand what type of special situation you've got here with this church. Embrace it and appreciate it because it is very unique and it is very, very special. God bless you all.